My husband called me a failure for being a stay-at-home mom, so I stopped staying home. It started on a Tuesday morning when Garrett threw his coffee mug at the kitchen wall. Not near it, at it. The ceramic exploded, leaving brown stains dripping down the white paint like dried blood. Our 3-year-old daughter Zoe was building a fort out of couch cushions when the crash made her freeze, her little hands clutching a pillow as she watched Daddy lose his mind over Cheerios scattered across the hardwood floor. "This house is a disaster," he screamed, gesturing wildly at the toys that had somehow multiplied overnight. "You sit here all day doing nothing while I work my ass off to support this pathetic excuse for a family." The words cut deeper than the ceramic shards I was already kneeling to collect, my fingers trembling as I picked up pieces that had scattered under the refrigerator. "I take care of our daughter," I said quietly, focusing on the broken mug rather than his twisted face. "That's not nothing, Garrett." But he was already spiraling into one of his rants, the kind that left me feeling smaller than the crumbs beneath our kitchen table. "Really? Because from where I stand, you're a glorified babysitter who can't even keep one room clean. My mother raised 4 kids and worked full-time without breaking a sweat. But you can't handle one child without falling apart like some kind of wounded victim." The comparison to his mother stung worst of all. She was a saint in his memory, though I'd noticed she never volunteered to babysit Zoe for more than an hour at a time. Funny how perfect mothers become when they're safely in the past, watching their sons repeat their father's mistakes. For 6 years, I'd given up everything that made me who I was. My marketing career at a Fortune 500 company, my network of professional contacts, my sense of identity beyond wiping noses and folding tiny clothes. When Zoe was born, Garrett had insisted I stay home with tears in his eyes and promises on his lips. "Our child needs her mother," he'd said, stroking my hair as I held our newborn daughter. "We can afford it on my salary, and think of all the precious moments you'll never get back." What he didn't mention was how he'd weaponize my sacrifice later. Every argument ended the same way, with him reminding me that he was the breadwinner while I was just the housewife. As if raising his daughter was some hobby I'd picked up to fill my empty days, rather than the 24-hour responsibility that left me exhausted and invisible. That afternoon, while Zoe napped and the house fell into its brief window of quiet, I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened my laptop and updated my LinkedIn profile. The woman staring back at me from my profile photo looked younger, more confident, like she believed her ideas mattered. I barely recognized her. Within hours, my phone was buzzing with notifications. Former colleagues reaching out, headhunters who'd somehow found my updated information, old bosses who remembered my work fondly. Apparently, 6 years wasn't the career death sentence I'd convinced myself it was when you had the right skills and experience. By Thursday, I had 3 interviews lined up with companies that seemed genuinely excited about my background. By Friday, I had a job offer that made my hands shake as I read the email. Senior marketing director at a promising tech startup. Salary, $95,000. Exactly what Garrett made at his accounting firm, before he reminded me daily that his paycheck was the only thing keeping our family afloat. When he came home that evening, I was feeding Zoe her dinner of chicken nuggets and apple slices, the kind of simple meal he'd criticized me for serving countless times. "We need to talk," I said, and watched his face immediately tense with the expectation of another domestic crisis requiring his attention. He sighed dramatically, loosening his tie like a man preparing for battle. "What now? Did you burn dinner again? Did the washing machine break? Did Zoe have another meltdown at the grocery store?" "I got a job," I said simply, sliding the offer letter across our kitchen table like it was a legal document that would change everything, which, in many ways, it was. He laughed when he saw the paper. Actually laughed like I just told him the funniest joke he'd heard all year. "Where exactly? The grocery store? Some retail position where they'll let you work around school hours? Good luck getting someone to hire a housewife with no recent experience in anything that matters." I watched his face change as he read the salary figure, watched the smugness drain away and replace itself with something that looked like fear. "This is ridiculous," he sputtered, his voice cracking slightly. "You can't just decide to go back to work without discussing it with me first. What about Zoe? What about maintaining our home? What about your responsibilities here? You'll figure it out," I said calmly, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "You're so capable, Garrett. You're always telling me how much better you are at managing everything than I am. I'm sure you'll handle it beautifully. Be serious for once in your life," he said, and I could see panic setting in behind his eyes. "You can't abandon your family for some corporate fantasy. This is just some midlife crisis or whatever, right? You'll come to your senses." "I'm not abandoning anyone," I replied, clearing Zoe's plate and wiping down her hands with the patience I'd developed over years of practice. "I'm just not staying home anymore. There's a difference." That weekend, while Garrett sulked and muttered about my selfish decision, I prepared for my return to professional life with the methodical planning of a general preparing for battle. I bought new work clothes that actually fit properly, updated my LinkedIn connections, and researched the startup I'd be joining. The company specialized in sustainable technology solutions, exactly the kind of innovative work I'd dreamed about during my late-night feeding sessions when Zoe was a baby. Sunday evening, I sat Garrett down for a conversation about logistics that he clearly hadn't thought through during his tantrum phase. "Zoe's daycare operates from 7 to 6, I explained, showing him the printed schedule I'd laminated years ago. "Drop-off is between 7 and 9, pick up before 6, or they charge late fees. She needs her lunch packed the night before, and her backup clothes checked weekly for size changes." "This is insane," he muttered, staring at the schedule like it was written in hieroglyphics. "How am I supposed to remember all of this while managing my own job?" "The same way I've been doing it for 3 years, I replied. "You adapt, you make lists, and you prioritize what matters most. Welcome to parenthood, Garrett." Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made everything feel possible. I put on my best business suit, the charcoal gray one that still fit perfectly after 3 years of yoga classes I'd managed to squeeze in during Zoe's nap time. Garrett sat at our kitchen table in his boxers and undershirt, staring at our daughter like she was a complex mathematical equation he'd never learned to solve. "Her daycare opens at 7 sharp, I said, checking my lipstick in the hallway mirror for the first time in years. I already packed her lunch in the purple lunchbox, and her backup clothes are in the blue bag hanging on her hook. She likes her sandwich cut into triangles, not squares, and if she has an accident, her extra underwear is in the side pocket. Don't forget to sign her out at pickup. They won't release her without a signature from the approved list." "Wait," he called out as I headed for the door with my briefcase and renewed sense of purpose. "That's it? You're just leaving me here with her? What if something goes wrong? What if she gets sick? What if I mess this up completely?" "You leave every morning at 7:30, I pointed out, my hand already on the doorknob. I figured I'd try it and see how it feels to walk out that door knowing someone else will handle everything that comes up during the day. My first day back in the corporate world felt like slipping into a favorite dress that still fit perfectly after years in storage. The startup's office buzzed with energy and possibility, filled with people who cared about quarterly projections and market penetration rather than whether the living room toys were properly organized. The conference room where I met my new team overlooked the city skyline, a view that reminded me there was a whole world beyond sippy cups and goldfish crackers. My new colleagues welcomed me with genuine enthusiasm. The marketing team was small but ambitious, working on campaigns for products that could actually change how people live their lives. During my lunch break, I called the daycare to check on Zoe, more out of habit than genuine worry. "She's having a wonderful time," the director assured me. "She's playing blocks with 2 other children and asked when Daddy was coming to get her instead of you. She seems very excited about the change in routine and keeps telling everyone that Mommy has an important job now." Meanwhile, my phone showed 7 missed calls from Garrett, each voicemail more frantic than the last. The messages ranged from confusion about lunch preferences to panic about pickup procedures to complete bewilderment about afternoon snack protocols. In one particularly desperate recording, I could hear Zoe crying in the background while he pleaded for information about her favorite comfort toy. When I arrived home at 6 o'clock, exactly when he usually walked through our front door, the house looked like a tornado had torn through every room with deliberate destructive intent. Zoe was sitting in front of the television in the same clothes from that morning, now decorated with what appeared to be yogurt, marker stains, and something that might have been Play-Doh. Garrett was frantically scrubbing dishes in the kitchen sink, his hair disheveled and his shirt wrinkled beyond redemption. "How was your first day back in the real world?" I asked sweetly, kissing Zoe's sticky forehead and noting that she seemed perfectly happy despite the chaos surrounding her. "This is completely insane," he said, without looking up from the mountain of dishes he was attacking with unnecessary aggression. Zoe had a complete meltdown at daycare pickup. She threw herself on the floor and screamed for 20 minutes straight. Other parents were staring at me like I was some kind of incompetent father who had no business being responsible for a child. It was absolutely humiliating. "Sounds like a typical Tuesday for me," I said, settling into the armchair where I used to collapse every evening in exhaustion. "What did you plan for dinner tonight?" His face went red, then white, then red again, like a broken traffic light. I didn't have time to think about cooking anything elaborate. I barely managed to get her from daycare to home without losing my complete sanity. "Do you have any idea how many times she asked for you? How many times she wanted to know when Mommy was coming home? How many questions she asks in a single car ride? Probably about as many times as she asks for you when you're at work all day," I replied, noting how the tables had turned so quickly it made my head spin. Funny how that works, isn't it? That night, I heard him on the phone with his mother, his voice carrying through our thin bedroom walls as he paced the hallway with the restless energy of someone completely out of their depth. "I don't understand women these days," he whispered urgently. "She just up and decided to get a job without even discussing it with me properly. Now she expects me to be some kind of house husband or something ridiculous. I'm supposed to know about lunch preferences and backup clothes and nap schedules and all these tiny details she never told me about." I smiled in the darkness, remembering all the times I'd tried to share those exact details with him, only to be told I was overthinking simple tasks that any competent adult should be able to handle intuitively. His mother, the same woman who'd raised 4 children while working full-time at a demanding job, apparently told him exactly what I would have expected her to say. I could hear her voice through the phone, though I couldn't make out her specific words. From his increasingly defensive responses, I gathered she wasn't offering the sympathy he'd been hoping for. Week 2 brought a parade of new challenges that tested Garrett's patience in ways he'd never experienced during his previous life as the absent breadwinner. He forgot to pack Zoe's lunch twice, resulting in phone calls from the daycare asking if we wanted them to provide her with their backup meal option. The first time, he drove across town during his lunch break to deliver a hastily assembled peanut butter sandwich. The second time, he just told them to charge us for their emergency lunch service. He was late to pick her up 3 different times, resulting in late fees that made him understand why I'd always been so paranoid about punctuality and time management. The daycare charged $5 for every minute past closing time, and watching him fumble for cash while other parents glared at him taught him more about responsibility than any lecture I could have given. He called me at work in a complete panic because he couldn't locate Zoe's special blanket for nap time, the one that meant the difference between a peaceful afternoon and a meltdown that would last for hours and echo through our entire evening routine. I could hear him tearing through her bedroom, opening drawers and closets with increasing desperation. "It's in the dryer," I said calmly, not looking up from the presentation I was preparing for our biggest client meeting of the quarter. "I always do laundry on Tuesdays, Garrett. The schedule is written on the calendar in the laundry room, right next to the detergent. All of her comfort items get washed on a rotating schedule to prevent hygiene issues." "Well, how was I supposed to know that specific detail?" he demanded, as if domestic schedules were some kind of secret code I'd never bothered to share with him during our years together. "The same way I learned it," I replied with patience that surprised even me, "by paying attention to what needs to be done and when it needs to happen to keep this family functioning smoothly. By trial and error, by asking questions, by caring enough to remember the answers." My colleagues at the startup began noticing my work in ways that reminded me why I'd loved my career in the first place. The CEO personally complimented a campaign I'd developed for their biggest product launch, calling it innovative and exactly the kind of fresh thinking they needed to break into new markets. My direct supervisor mentioned my name in the weekly leadership meeting, praising my ability to jump back into high-level strategic thinking after my time away from corporate life. I felt alive and valuable in ways I'd forgotten were possible, like a plant that had been moved from a dark corner into direct sunlight, after years of barely surviving on minimal nutrients. During team meetings, my opinions were sought and valued. My ideas shaped actual business decisions that affected real outcomes. People listened when I spoke, took notes on my suggestions, and implemented strategies I developed. Meanwhile, Garrett's performance at his own job started showing the strain of his new responsibilities in ways that worried both of us. He was constantly exhausted, frequently distracted during important meetings, and perpetually worried about everything happening at home while he tried to focus on spreadsheets and client calls. His usual sharp attention to detail began slipping, and he started making mistakes that his boss noticed immediately. His accounting firm prided itself on precision and reliability, qualities that were becoming increasingly difficult for Garrett to maintain while juggling childcare responsibilities. Client reports contained errors he would have caught easily before. He missed 2 important deadlines because he'd been dealing with Zoe-related emergencies. His boss called him in for a serious meeting about missed deadlines and declining quality in his work, the kind of conversation that threatened annual bonuses and future promotions. "This is entirely your fault," he told me that night, his voice tight with frustration and barely controlled anger that seemed to fill our entire kitchen. "I can't focus at work when I'm constantly worried about everything falling apart at home. I'm getting behind on important projects because I'm thinking about pickup times and snack preferences, and whether Zoe remembered her jacket when the temperature dropped unexpectedly. Welcome to my world for the past 6 years, I said, not looking up from the reports I was reviewing for tomorrow's crucial meeting with potential investors. That's been my entire life, Garrett. Every single day, trying to focus on being a good mother while worrying about whether I was failing at everything else that mattered. Somehow you expected me to handle all of that without it affecting my performance as a mother, a wife, or a functioning human being. That's completely different," he insisted, though his voice lacked its usual conviction and authority. "You're her mother. This stuff is supposed to come naturally to women. It's biological or something scientific that I don't understand." "And you're her father," I replied, finally looking up from my papers to meet his exhausted eyes. "Biology doesn't make you incompetent, and it doesn't make domestic responsibilities exclusively feminine skills that men can't possibly learn or master." By month 3, something fundamental had shifted in our household dynamics in ways that surprised both of us. Garrett stopped complaining about daycare pickup and started chatting with other parents about playground politics and preschool curriculum choices. I'd occasionally overhear him on the phone with other fathers, comparing notes about potty training setbacks and discussing the merits of different educational philosophies. He learned to braid Zoe's hair after watching several YouTube tutorials, cursing creatively at his laptop screen as he practiced on a doll I'd found in her toy box. His first attempts looked like abstract art, but he persisted with determination I hadn't seen him apply to domestic tasks before. Within a few weeks, he could create neat braids that earned compliments from other parents and made Zoe feel special. He discovered that she actually loved helping with laundry when he turned it into an elaborate sorting game, with prizes for matching socks and finding all the pink items. What had been a dreaded chore for me became quality bonding time for them, complete with silly songs and dancing around the laundry room. Zoe looked forward to these sessions, treating them like special time with Daddy rather than work that needed to be completed. But he also started resenting my professional success in ways that caught me off guard. When I got promoted to director level after 4 months, with a salary increase that brought my income to $110,000, his congratulations felt forced and resentful, like words he was choking on while swallowing his pride. "Must be nice," he muttered over dinner, stabbing his chicken with unnecessary force while Zoe chattered about her day at preschool. "Getting rewarded for abandoning your family and pursuing completely selfish goals while someone else picks up all the pieces you've left behind." "I didn't abandon anyone," I said, meeting his eyes across our kitchen table while Zoe continued building elaborate structures with her mashed potatoes. "I just stopped martyring myself for your convenience and everyone else's outdated expectations about what mothers should sacrifice for their families." The real turning point came during Zoe's parent-teacher conference in November, when the autumn leaves were falling and the air carried the promise of winter holidays. I'd taken time off work to attend, something Garrett had never done during my 6 years as a stay-at-home mother managing every aspect of her education and development. We sat in tiny chairs designed for 4-year-olds while Zoe's teacher spread her artwork across a miniature table covered with alphabet placemats. "Zoe's doing wonderfully this year," her teacher said warmly, sorting through paintings and drawings that showed remarkable improvement since the beginning of the school year. "She's become much more independent and confident lately, especially in social situations where she used to cling to familiar adults. And she talks about both parents equally now, which is lovely to see in a child her age. Before this year, it was always mommy does this, mommy does that, mommy knows everything about everything. Now she shares stories about cooking adventures with Daddy and weekend trips to the park with both parents together." She paused to show us a drawing Zoe had made of our family. In previous artwork, I had always been depicted as significantly larger than Garrett, reflecting how much more present I was in her daily life. But this new drawing showed us the same size, holding hands with Zoe in the middle, all 3 of us smiling under a bright yellow sun. In the car afterward, Garrett was uncharacteristically quiet as we drove through our neighborhood's tree-lined streets where other families were raking leaves and preparing for Halloween. "She's happier," he finally admitted, his voice barely audible over the radio playing soft jazz. "She has 2 engaged parents now instead of 1 overwhelmed parent and 1 absent parent," I replied, watching a father push his daughter on a tire swing in someone's front yard. It's amazing what happens when responsibility gets shared instead of dumped entirely on one person's shoulders while the other person gets to be the fun weekend parent. I never realized how hard it actually was, he said, and I could hear genuine remorse creeping into his voice for the first time since this whole experiment began. Being responsible for absolutely everything, all the time, without any breaks or backup plans or someone to hand things off to when you're overwhelmed. I used to think you just played with her all day, and maybe did some light cleaning around the house. I had no idea about the constant vigilance, the endless stream of tiny decisions, the way your brain never gets to rest even when she's sleeping because you're always planning the next meal or worrying about whether she's developing properly. And I never realized how much I missed feeling valued for my intelligence instead of just my ability to clean up Cheerios and mediate toddler meltdowns over mismatched socks, I said, pulling into our driveway where jack-o'-lanterns grinned from our front steps. I forgot I had a brain that could solve problems more complex than what to serve for lunch or how to remove crayon marks from walls without damaging the paint. 6 months after I'd returned to work, we'd found our new rhythm like dancers learning a complicated routine that required precision and trust. Garrett handled morning duty with military precision, getting Zoe dressed, fed, and delivered to daycare, while I reviewed emails and prepared for early meetings that often determined the direction of entire marketing campaigns. He developed systems for everything, from laying out clothes the night before to packing lunch while coffee brewed. I managed evening routines, helping with homework that would start soon, and overseeing bath time and bedtime stories that had become more elaborate, now that I wasn't exhausted from managing every detail of our domestic life. We alternated weekend activities and shared household chores with the kind of efficiency we'd never achieved when everything fell on my shoulders like an avalanche of endless responsibilities. Most importantly, our marriage had transformed from a partnership of convenience into a relationship between equals who respected each other's contributions and challenges. We talked more, argued less, and found ourselves actually enjoying each other's company again, instead of just coexisting in a state of mutual resentment. The winter holidays brought unexpected revelations about how much our family had changed. When my sister visited for Christmas, she immediately noticed the difference in our dynamics. Garrett was the one who knew where Zoe's special Christmas dress was hanging, who remembered that she preferred her hot chocolate with mini marshmallows arranged in a specific pattern, who could predict exactly when she'd need a nap to avoid a holiday meltdown that would ruin everyone's day. You two have completely switched roles, my sister observed as we watched Garrett patiently help Zoe wrap presents for her daycare teachers. It's like watching some kind of social experiment in real time, but it actually seems to be working better than your old arrangement. Not switched, I corrected, sipping coffee that was still hot because I'd actually had time to drink it while it was fresh. We've just distributed them more fairly. Garrett's discovering skills he never knew he had, and I'm remembering skills I thought I'd lost forever during my years in domestic isolation. My brother-in-law, who had always been skeptical of non-traditional arrangements, admitted he was impressed by how well Garrett had adapted to his new responsibilities. He actually seems to enjoy the day-to-day stuff with Zoe, he said. I always figured men just weren't wired for that kind of detailed parenting, but maybe I was wrong about that assumption. Spring brought new challenges and opportunities as our arrangement became more established. Garrett started researching preschool programs for the following year, comparing curriculums and visiting facilities with the same thoroughness he'd once applied to financial planning. He joined a playgroup with other stay-at-home parents, initially feeling awkward as the only father, but gradually building friendships with people who understood the isolation and rewards of full-time childcare. I took on larger projects at work, including a campaign for a major product launch that required occasional travel. The first time I went to a conference in another city, Garrett was nervous about managing Zoe alone for 3 days, but when I returned, I found them both thriving. They'd established their own routines, created inside jokes I wasn't part of, and developed a father-daughter bond that had been impossible when he was absent most of the time. The transformation wasn't always smooth. There were days when Garrett called me in tears because Zoe had been particularly difficult, when I felt guilty for missing her school performance, when we both wondered if we were somehow damaging our daughter by refusing to conform to traditional family structures that our parents and neighbors still expected. But there were also moments of pure joy that proved we'd made the right choice. Like the afternoon, I came home to find Garrett and Zoe covered in flour, laughing as they attempted to bake cookies that looked more like abstract art than edible treats. Or the morning when Zoe proudly announced to her entire preschool class that her mommy was the boss of a whole company and her daddy was the best cookie maker in the world. Last week, his mother visited for Zoe's 4th birthday celebration, bringing her famous chocolate cake and an armload of presents that would probably take us weeks to find space for. She watched Garrett expertly pack Zoe's snack bag while explaining the importance of including both something healthy and something fun, while I reviewed client emails at our kitchen table with the kind of focused concentration I'd missed for years. I'm genuinely proud of you, she told her son, and I could hear approval in her voice that had been absent during previous visits when she'd watched me struggle to meet impossible standards. Your father never learned to braid hair or pack a proper lunch for any of you children. He thought that was women's work and beneath his attention or consideration. You're being a much better father than he ever was, and it shows in how confident and secure Zoe has become. Then she turned to me with an expression I'd never seen before, something that looked almost like respect mixed with understanding and perhaps a touch of regret. And I owe you a sincere apology for not speaking up sooner when I should have. When Garrett called me complaining about you going back to work, I told him he was being completely ridiculous and selfish. Women have been managing both career and family responsibilities for generations without making such a fuss about it. It was past time he learned what that actually requires on a daily basis. She paused, looking around our kitchen where family photos showed the evolution of our changed dynamic. I also want to apologize for not being more supportive when you were struggling those first few years. I knew you were overwhelmed, but I thought that was just how motherhood was supposed to be. I didn't realize how isolated and undervalued you felt. That evening, as I tucked Zoe into her bed surrounded by birthday presents and drawings she'd made at school, she wrapped her small arms around my neck with the fierce affection only children can provide when they feel completely secure and loved. "Mommy, I really like that you go to work now," she said, her voice sleepy but serious in the way that meant she'd been thinking about this for a while. "You do, sweetheart? Why is that?" I asked, genuinely curious about her 4-year-old perspective on our family's transformation. "Because when you come home every day, you're always happy to see me. Before, you always looked so tired and sad, like something was wrong but you couldn't tell me what it was. Now you smile when you walk in the door, and you tell me about interesting things that happened at your office." From the doorway, Garrett nodded with understanding that had taken months to develop through experience rather than explanation. "She's absolutely right about that," he said. "You're completely different now. Better, stronger, more like the woman I fell in love with before everything got so complicated and we forgot who we were outside of our assigned roles." "I'm the same person I always was," I replied, stroking Zoe's hair as her breathing began to slow towards sleep. "I just remembered that I was more than just a mother and a housewife. I remembered that I had value beyond domestic service and keeping everyone else comfortable while sacrificing my own needs and ambitions." 9 months after my return to corporate life, I received another promotion that surprised everyone, including myself. Vice President of Marketing, with a salary that reached $135,000, significantly more than Garrett's accounting position had ever provided, even with his annual bonuses and performance incentives. The promotion came with increased responsibilities, a corner office with windows, and the kind of respect I'd forgotten was possible. My team looked to me for strategic direction, and my opinions influenced company-wide decisions about product development and market positioning. I was invited to industry conferences, quoted in trade publications, and recognized as a thought leader in sustainable technology marketing. Instead of feeling threatened or diminished by my success, he surprised me with a suggestion that revealed how much he'd grown during our role reversal experiment. "I'm seriously thinking about cutting back to part-time hours," he said one evening as we cleaned up after dinner together, "working as a team in ways we'd never managed when I was drowning in domestic responsibilities. Maybe starting that consulting business I used to talk about before Zoe was born, and everything became about maintaining traditional expectations. I could work from home a few days each week, be here when she gets home from school, maybe even volunteer for field trips and classroom activities." "You want to become a stay-at-home dad?" I asked, trying not to smile at the irony of how completely our perspectives had shifted. "Part-time at least," he clarified, scrubbing a particularly stubborn pan while I loaded the dishwasher with the efficiency of someone who'd finally found balance. "Zoe's in preschool now, but someone should be here when she gets home each day to help with homework and just be present for all those little moments that matter so much. And honestly, some of my very best days are the ones I spend entirely with her, just the two of us figuring things out together without any outside pressures or schedules to maintain." "But what if people think you're just a glorified babysitter who can't even keep the house properly clean?" I asked, unable to resist throwing his old words back at him like a boomerang returning to its sender. He had the grace to wince visibly, setting down the pan and turning to face me with genuine remorse in his eyes. I absolutely deserved that comment, and probably a lot worse given how cruel and dismissive I was to you for so many years. "But if you think we can make it work financially, I'd really like to try this arrangement. Just remember to be patient with me when I mess up. Being home with your child isn't failure, but it might be the hardest job in the world." Spring brought new challenges and unexpected joys as we settled into our reversed roles with increasing confidence. Garrett started a consulting business that allowed him to work flexible hours while being available for Zoe's school events and playground dates. His accounting background served him well as he helped small businesses manage their finances, and he could schedule client meetings around school pickups and soccer practices. I took on larger projects at work, traveling occasionally for conferences and client meetings that reminded me how much I'd missed intellectual stimulation and professional recognition. The startup was growing rapidly, and my marketing strategies were credited with helping secure several major partnerships that positioned the company for long-term success. The transformation wasn't always smooth. There were days when Garrett called me in tears because Zoe had been particularly difficult, refusing to cooperate with basic requests and testing every boundary he'd established. There were evenings when I felt guilty for missing her school performance because of a crucial client presentation, when we both wondered if we were somehow damaging our daughter by refusing to conform to traditional family structures that our parents and neighbors still expected. But there were also moments of pure joy that proved we'd made the right choice. Like the afternoon I came home to find Garrett and Zoe covered in flour, laughing as they attempted to bake cookies that looked more like abstract art than edible treats. They'd turned the kitchen into a disaster zone, but their faces glowed with happiness and flour. Or the morning when Zoe proudly announced to her entire preschool class that her mommy was the boss of a whole company and her daddy was the best cookie maker in the world. One year after I'd first walked out that door with my briefcase, our local newspaper ran a feature story about changing family dynamics in our community. They interviewed several families who'd chosen non-traditional arrangements, and somehow our story became the centerpiece of the article. The reporter was fascinated by how completely we'd reversed roles and how successful the transition had been. Garrett spoke eloquently about discovering aspects of fatherhood he'd never experienced when he was absent most of the time. Being present for the daily moments, the scraped knees, the breakthrough moments when she learned something new, the afternoon conversations that revealed how her mind worked, had changed his entire perspective on what it meant to be a parent. I talked about rediscovering my professional identity and how much more present I could be as a mother when I wasn't responsible for every aspect of domestic life. The guilt I'd expected to feel about working long hours never materialized because I knew Zoe was getting quality time with her father instead of being shuffled between childcare providers. A full year after I'd stopped staying home, our roles had completely reversed in ways neither of us had anticipated when this journey began. I was the primary breadwinner, focused on quarterly targets and strategic planning that challenged me intellectually in ways I'd forgotten were possible. Garrett managed school pickups, play dates, and the intricate social calendar that comes with having a school-age child who was developing her own friendships and interests. Most importantly, we were both genuinely happier than we'd been in years, individually and as a couple. Our marriage had evolved from a partnership based on convenience and traditional expectations into a relationship built on mutual respect and shared responsibility. We communicated better, appreciated each other's contributions, and found ourselves looking forward to family time instead of enduring it. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. By calling me a failure for being a stay-at-home mother, Garrett had accidentally liberated us both from rigid expectations that hadn't been serving our family or our individual growth. I'd rediscovered my worth outside of purely domestic duties, while he'd discovered his capacity for nurturing and patience that had been buried under years of traditional masculine expectations and societal pressure to be the distant provider. Now when people ask about our unconventional arrangement at neighborhood barbecues or school functions, Garrett's the one who gets defensive on my behalf, protecting our choices with the same fierce dedication I'd once used to defend his career ambitions. My wife has an incredibly important career that she's brilliant at, he'll say with genuine pride that still surprises me sometimes. I'm lucky that I get to spend more time with our daughter and really understand what she needs from day to day. It's the most rewarding work I've ever done, and I can't imagine going back to being an absent father who only shows up for bedtime stories. Sometimes I catch him playing the same elaborate games with Zoe that I used to create during my lonely days at home, desperate to make mundane activities feel special and engaging, making lunch preparation fun by cutting sandwiches into star shapes and arranging vegetables into smiley faces that make her giggle, turning cleanup time into races with prizes for the fastest toy sorter and most creative organization system, finding ways to make mundane household tasks feel magical and important for a 4-year-old who craves attention and engagement from the adults who matter most to her. And sometimes, when he's particularly frustrated after a difficult day of parenting, when Zoe's had a meltdown about wearing the wrong socks, or refused to eat anything but crackers for 3 meals in a row, or spent 20 minutes crying because her favorite doll looked sad, and nothing he tried could console her, I gently remind him of his old perspective with a smile that contains years of vindication. It's just like being a glorified babysitter who sits around all day doing nothing important, right? He doesn't think it's funny when I say that, even though I deliver the line with perfect comedic timing that would make a professional comedian proud. But I absolutely do, and I probably always will. Because sometimes the best revenge is simply proving that you were right all along.